Hello, welcome to episode 281 of The Crate and Crowbar. It is the 8th of May, 2019. My name is Chris Thurston, and tonight I'm joined by Tom Francis.
Hello.
And Alex Wiltshire.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. I want to take a nice, gentle, relaxing start to this podcast to explain some lovely changes to PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds in China. Quite liked this. And obviously maybe, there are some broader sort of businessy reasonings and sort of reasons why this has happened. But the outcome is, as we were just discussing before we started recording, kind of nice. So PUBG Mobile in China has been closed and relaunched as, I think, Game for Peace is
Really?
its title. Yeah.
Wow. That's
which
a stretch.
I think now and it's part of this is it has a more patriotic cast and it explicitly pays tribute, I think, to the Chinese Air Force. But in it and it's the same game broadly to the extent that players' progress just transfers over from PUBG. So but the flagship change, in addition to no blood or gore, is that when killed in PUBG now, players fall down, stand up, wave goodbye, and leave.
They present you with a loot box first, don't they?
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you get their stuff.
Present.
So you're not even stealing it from them. They actually wanted you to have it before they left.
And don't they, there's a sort of smile as well. It's like, thank you.
But it's like, the clip I saw was like, the guy's crawling on his hands and knees before he does this, presumably in some kind of like wounded state. But then like the last minute, present loot box, thumbs up, wave, disappear.
So by Games for Peace, does that mean that when you shoot somebody, you're kind of getting them to be peaceful?
Player unharmed, happy grounds. That's the name they should have gone with.
I just think it's quite, I would, given that really it is a cosmetic change, I would welcome this as a toggle in maybe all games.
Yeah. Including Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean,
Especially.
Farewells instead of fatalities.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think they brought back mercy into Mortal Kombat, but I don't know if they brought back, babalities or animalities or any of the other novelty-alities, that they used to have. But, I just want the, you know what, actually, I don't wish you ill button. Like, finish him. Are you alright? That looked like it hurt. Would you like a cup of tea?
Let's go again.
Goodbye, Sub-Zero. Yeah, I'd love that. I just think, I have no ill will to dispose towards this simply because it's quite sweet.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it's backed by a fundamentally terrifying kind of edict.
Yes, right. Yeah, it is. And there's obviously a sort of a censorious apparatus there that makes something like this actually happen. But as a way of implementing it,
you work with what you got.
Yeah, as a way of implementing it, I kind of do wish all games could have this toggle. Because there's not really any good reason why Call of Duty needs to be an 18 in order to furnish the experience that it furnishes, right? And kids play it anyway. So let's take that as the logic, right? Kids will play Call of Duty. Parents will buy Call of Duty for their kids. Call of Duty will remain an 18 rated game. Why not just take out the blood and gore and things and replace it with the little, ooh, good job. Goodbye.
What was that Doom-like game that was, I think you may have been Noah shooting animals. But of course you weren't shooting animals, but you were obviously, that's what you were doing.
Ark Survival Evolved.
But it was a Bible game. I can't remember what it was called, and I don't know what the thematic device being used for the...
So in Mini Ninjas by the Hitman folks, funnily enough, you are fighting enemy samurais and stuff, but when you defeat them, you do enough damage to them, they turn back into the forest animals they were all along. And actually there were forest animals trapped in the
the old Sonic trick.
That is the old Sonic trick,
right?
Like the robots in Sonic are piloted by commandeered squirrels and shit. So you got to crack them open.
Are the squirrels, so when you rescue the squirrels, they're like good squirrels? They're not.
They scamper away, yeah. And then at the end
I think they've been entrapped within tombs.
Yeah.
But is the squirrel controlling the robot?
That's the question.
I think it's more like powering the robot. Like, it's like really, really
Oh, it's like a treadmill.
Sonic was like the Matrix before the Matrix, right? In the Matrix, they take all the people, they put them in weird baths, and they, plug them into the Matrix to use them as batteries. Does that make sense? No, not at all. It would make more sense to put a person in every individual robot to act as a battery. Would that work either? No.
Very little of this was
They
in
understood.
the Sonic cutscene, introductory cutscene.
And very little of this was in the Sonic movie trailer, actually. There's many things wrong with it.
Well, they not appreciate and respect the core,
the integrity of that fiction.
Obviously coherent and very cool original design.
Yeah. Jim Carrey needs a big fucking box with a huge yellow button on the top of it. And when you smack that button, the sides fall away and it's just full of fucking chipmunks. If that doesn't happen, then, I think they've chosen the wrong aspects of the license, essentially.
Yeah.
Or at some point
Agreed.
in that, someone's got to capture, James Marsden and stuff him inside a robot. And then,
Do go on. I want to know more.
I would say this, there's a rule with James Marsden performances in films in which, and in TV, including Westworld, where, James Marsden must either die or be cuckolded in every film he's in, or both.
Oh, is he like...
He was Cyclops in X-Men, just to be...
In Westworld, is he the sort of pseudo-hero character who...
He turns out he's, like Dolores's beau. He's the would-be John Marsden of Westworld. Yeah. Yeah. He plays the protagonist looking man who is then overshadowed by the actual protagonist of the thing.
Yeah.
So in many ways, actually, maybe the Sonic movie is just a retread of the Bryan Singer X-Men film, but instead of Wolverine, it's Sonic.
Good.
What other news was there?
Oh, there was a sort of slightly sad news about that Danish studio what done the Echo game.
Ultra. I wanted to mention this. They've shut down. And I did eventually get around to playing Echo, which is this game that, it's a stealth game where all of the enemies are clones of you, or copies of you in some sense, and you are hiding from them in this kind of almost limitless palace. Like it's all one giant palace. And the power keeps going out, and every time the power goes out, everyone kind of resets, like all the enemies kind of wake up again. And their abilities are determined by what you did in the last cycle. Like each kind of cycle of the power, they're able to learn from you. Basically, it's like the palace is trying to imitate you in some way. They're trying to like make a copy of you, but it can't get you quite right. And so it can only copy things you've done in the last, recently. So it's a really interesting idea. And I played it finally, a month ago. And I'm not that surprised that, the studio encountered difficulties, because it seems incredibly expensively made and a super high concept that's very weird. And, it took me a while to explain it, just now. And then the game itself doesn't get to that for like an hour and a half to 2 hours. The first hour and a half to 2 hours is just like a really expensively made, like sci-fi movie almost. It is, you're walking around, you're in control, but you're just exploring this place and just trying to understand what it is and just going down endless corridors and, it's huge, spectacular vistas and stuff that's seems really expensive to make. And you're learning slowly about what this thing is and how it works. And there's always backstory about the culture you come from and this weird AI who's kind of a jerk to you. And then nearly 2 hours in, it gets to the actual stealth game where these things are learning from you. And even then, I've only just got to like the very beginning of that. And so it's such a weird game, because if you're in it for this interesting mechanic, which I was, this stuff feels like kind of an annoying delay, but it's also really expensive to produce. If you're in it for a big cinematic experience, it's going to be weird that it feels like a lavish opening to a sci-fi film, but then it's never, as far as I know, I don't think you ever get out of the palace. Don't think you ever encounter anyone who isn't just you again, which is a very stripped down sort of indie type, concept where you keep the asset budget low by just having this one area. So it almost feels like in some ways I won't say the worst of both worlds, but the least wise of both worlds, where like high concept, weird mechanic buried in a lot of very lavish cinematic stuff, in a way that I almost, the idea is there's something there. It could work, but it's spoiled for me just because the checkpointing is really bad. And if you get caught by any of these enemies, it goes into like a button mashing quick time event, and it's basically over because even though you can win that if there's only one of them, while it's happening, another one will wander over, and as soon as they touch you, it's just fully game over. And even though it's got this mechanic of everything resetting, and they get to kind of wake up again, like if you take them out, they get back up every time it resets. But that doesn't apply to you, so when you get taken out, you're just wherever the plot last last checkpointed, there is no quick save. And for me, that's like 7 minutes of traversal before I get to the actual fight that I died in. And that's happened to me like 3 times, and I'm just done with it now. I don't have that kind of time. And like stealth games, you fail a lot. Like that's kind of
how you learn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You experiment, you try things and they don't work out. And the penalty for failing is so harsh that it just ruins all of the interesting stuff it's doing, unfortunately.
And does that kind of, did you feel that, the AI responds to what you do affected your choices because you I don't want to do this thing because...
It might have been getting to that, but the bit that I played, it's just starting to introduce that. Like the characters, you and your AI have not figured that out yet. They're sort of saying, oh, it's almost as if maybe the Ballas is paying attention in some way to what I'm doing, but it hasn't developed enough to the point that even the characters have acknowledged that it's happening. So it hasn't got interesting yet. Like, it's very much the tutorial sections where you go through a huge, long section where there's loads of enemies, but they're all behind doors and they can't open the doors. And it's leading towards a bit where you open a door and then the next cycle, all of them come out of those doors because they can open them, which is a cool kind of moment. But that's it. I haven't got to a bit where, like a freeform bit where I'm actually have to think about whether or not I open a door and, that kind of stuff. I can, eat grapes because it's a palace. Like one of the only interactive things in the scenery is just like these, bowls of grapes. And if you eat them, that's one of the things the palace notices about you. Like every time you do something, it notices, it creates this silhouette. So you know what it's paying attention to. And I haven't seen it come up, but I think it's actually like a mechanic because if you eat the grapes, it means on the next cycle, the enemy will stop to eat the grapes, which might like slow them down and give you an opportunity to slip by them and stuff.
That's cool.
Huh. Because it's a sort of digital kind of Baroque kind of endlessly recursive, bizarre Baroque kind of palace-y environment.
It's not a simulation, at least in the fiction of the thing. Obviously, it is.
It is real.
You'd actually go to this palace. That's why it's so expensive to make. They just build it.
Yeah, you had to go to Vienna to do it.
It feels ripe for a kind of like, it's all an AI simulation and it's being generated on the fly. I mean, maybe that's a late game plot twist or something, but there's been no hint of that so far. It's like you literally land on this planet and you're trying to understand why is there this vast palace thing that goes on forever.
I hadn't heard of it at all until you just introduced it.
I remember the screenshots because it does screenshot very well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
not that I played it.
The name, I guess, once you kind of fully understand the mechanic, the name does like link up to it in some specific way, but by itself, the name is super generic and I just think you forget what it is.
Shame that it underperformed to the extent that this has been the fate of the studio.
Yeah, I don't know if the things that I noticed about it are the actual reasons, but I can't imagine it helped.
Yeah, shame. Genuinely sounds cool. Although, yeah, so actually to distill that, would you actually recommend it?
Only if what I said sounds good to you. I guess no, because for me the checkpointing thing is just such a big problem that I'm not going to progress with it, and I won't get to the interesting mechanical stuff. I was starting to. I got to see enough of it to see, I like this idea, but I don't have the patience to get into the meat of it, and so I guess no. But to be honest, like if you get it super cheap in a sale or something, it's and you like sci-fi movies where they land on a weird planet and walk around it trying to figure out what it is, the first hour and a half of it is that, and it's a good version of that.
What you been playing, Alex?
I went back to Total Warhammer 2.
To War, to Total, to Hammer.
I really like it, but I'm very, very, very bad at it. So I've had a sort of slightly sort of self-abusive relationship with it where ever since it and the first game came out, I've started so many campaigns and played them up to a certain point. I think it's the same pattern every time, and it'll take 1 hour, it might take 10 hours, but I'll face my first kind of defeat and I'll just find my motivation just fall away completely.
The XCOM problem.
And I don't know what it is, why I feel why my motivation is. It because I don't understand why I got defeated.
Are you get defeated in like the real-time battle?
No, well, usually, it's always as a result of campaign stuff, like, there's a massive army and all my other armies over there. But I just love the concept, and I love Warhammer, and I just want to play it a lot. I've also played with my son, and, we play together, and he loves that shit.
Are you playing the new expansion?
So no, I'm not. But I was inspired by. So I think that this is my most successful run so far, and it's with Skaven. It's with
my favourite one.
It's with the main. I should fucking know.
Queek
Head Taker, who is a fighty Skaven as opposed to a technological Skaven or a magic Skaven. But I was inspired by watching a YouTuber run of the Kit Claw, which is the new character that's just come out, who's just fucking awesome, just really fun, kind of looking.
Got a little painted Kit Claw just there.
Oh, have you? Yeah. We have to inspect this in a minute. We are arrayed with wonderful little models.
But then you didn't play as them.
No, so I went back because I needed to just remember stuff. Just kind of, I wanted to play, let's just go back. Let's go back. And it's been really fucking successful, and I've had a really, really, really good time with it. And I actually really want to be playing it right now. It's one of those things, and I just felt hours just drop away. The only problem is that my son is very upset with me for playing when I'm like, last night at 9:30, I had to tell him to go to bed, and he said, okay, when you switch off. And I said, I can't switch off. And you've got to go to bed. And he was not happy about this. But like, it's just, one of the things I'm really enjoying about it is how they've, turned, I don't know if you've talked about this on the pod before, but how they've used the lore in such good ways. So Skaven obviously are these horrific giant man-like rats, which live in ruins and under cities, and you don't know that nobody knows there's such an incredibly large infestation of them, and at any point they are about to break out and just take over the entire world. And they are nasty and compete with each other. They feed each other to their gods. They just they have slaves, rats that work for them. They're pretty reprehensible, and they're a lot of fucking fun. And they, what I've been really enjoying are the ways that, Warhammer, like the Total War game, reflects these attributes. So one of my favorite things that I'm kind of coming across, that they can build an under empire, so normally in Total War, in order to get a city, to make money, you have to get cities and build stuff in them, and, that will generate currency for you, and you can set up armies in these places. But with the Skaven, and also Vampire Coast, which have a similar mechanic, you can set up an under empire, which means sending out a specific type of hero out called a warlock engineer to a city, one that maybe is making loads of money, or maybe they're a city you want to take over, and you can spend an action with them setting up and you can build buildings in that city, underneath the city, 4 slots, but then there's a little kind of discoverability element to it. Yeah. So the more powerful the building, the more discoverability points. If you get to 100, it will be discovered. So there are other buildings that reduce that while giving fewer good effects. So you've got to balance what you want. But one of those cities and one of those buildings, and the most, the pinnacle one, is called the Vermintide. And this allows you to, when that building finishes construction, it basically bursts, and a full army of Skaven appears in the city, ready for you to command in battle. Without that, and are they
like inside the city walls?
No, it will be. I imagine it'll just positioned at the city, and you'll have to presumably take. You
might do an inner city battle, because there are quite a lot of maps for that.
Might do, yeah. I don't know. That's a really good, interesting question, actually, because you'd think you'd be inside the walls. Yeah. I need to do that now. But basically, there's a really nice idea. Like, I haven't got to a stage where I need to do this at this point, but there will be some sticky characters, like Nagarond are the joint head of the head of the game with me at the moment. And I know I will probably have to take out their their capital city with an under empire kind of vermintide attack. But that's really cool. There's this food mechanic where this is a race that it's just so much biomass that needs to be fed, that you have to also collect food for your empire as well as money. The food is constantly ticking down, and there are many ways to get food, but when your food supply goes down, everybody starts revolting. Your city starts revolting against you, and you lose public order. You lose growth as cities start to starve, and that's kind of a nice thing. And the last one is they have a form of very specific corruption. Like there's a chaos corruption as well, and vampiric corruption. The Skaven corruption isn't particularly good. Well, it is kind of good for you as a player, because as corruption increases, basically they're filthy rats, and they make everywhere they go really nasty places covered in rat shit and things like that, I guess, and kind of rubbish. And the longer you are settled somewhere, the greater the corruption in the area, and that reduces public order. Presumably the normal people that also presumably live in your cities. This is something I really struggle with in the Total Warhammer games, where presumably when you take over a city, it's still peopled by the people.
Not in Total Warhammer, because there are also restrictions on who can take what cities as well.
That's true.
So like, and also like a lot of the Skaven, one of the other Skaven mechanics is they can build a city in a ruin, and it's not visible as a city to the other factions until they discover that, oh shit, it's actually full of Skaven.
Does that mean the Skaven don't like the mess they make either? Presumably it does.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about Skaven. That's why the great thing about them is they have a sort of pathos. There's a sort of like, we fucked it up for ourselves as well. We can't stop fucking it up.
But let's keep going.
But the only way is forwards.
Yeah. So you get these public order issues, but you get the greater the amount of Skaven corruption, you get more menace from below. And this is like, so the menace from below is, the Skaven, when you take them into battles, they are very numerous. So they have very large groups you have lots of, individual fighters in any unit of swords, rats, or
clan rats and Skaven
slaves and whatnot. But none of them are very strong. They're very fast, but none of them are very strong, and they tend to run away quickly.
Also, fun fact, they get faster when they run away.
They do. And that becomes an important part of the strategy. Like a good thing is taking in your lowest, very, very cheapest, then they are incredibly cheap, units, Skaven slaves, bait your enemy in with them, and then your Skaven slaves the enemy runs after them, and then you get swords, clan rats, to kind of pile in from the sides and back.
It's really the bard and archer tactic.
I was going to say, because you just reminded me that like my favorite, like, because so are you playing Mortal Empires or
just campaign? I did have a Mortal Empires run on the go.
So Mortal Empires is the one where you just load a faction into the full world of Warhammer, which stitches together Total Warhammer 1 and 2. But yeah, so Skaven is the only one I finished the campaign with. But my favorite victory in that entire run was an ambush victory and an ambush battle. And in an ambush battle, the idea is you've kind of caught the enemy on the march, so they are forced to deploy in a column, like as if the army is marching somewhere, and you can deploy however you like.
On both sides of them.
Yeah, on both sides of them. But I chose to deploy just on one side of them with, I think, 18 warp lightning cannons and just Skaven slaves in front of them, which is bard and archers. It's just bard versus lightning railgun. And it was, dark elves, but those of like, obviously just the spearmen and stuff. And then like one sort of dark elf, like high lord on dragon, like at the back. And because you can sort of like instantly pause and queue an order before they fire. The favorite thing was like everyone charging these Skaven slaves and it being a big mess, and then 18 warp lightning cannons firing at the same dragon at the same time and killing him instantly. It was great. It's the best thing. And like, that's why I love the Warhammer Total War games so much, is they bend that, the formula of what's acceptable or possible in Total War game, and just encourage you to break it, really. Cause it's like, it's Warhammer,
the number of kind of, sort of functions you have at your fingertips any time is great.
Yeah.
But the weakness of the Skaven, really can be pretty terrifying. It's because you're particularly at the start of the game, you're really susceptible to cavalry and you're really susceptible to enemy missiles, like arrow kind of ranged attacks, because you don't get ranged attacks really until probably about, I don't know, an hour in or so. Like,
you get like slings and stuff, but they're not
that's
great.
like, you don't even have them right at the very start.
No, right, yeah. Gutter runners come a bit later, right?
Yeah, so, that's right. But
do you ever get like the ability to ride larger rats for your cavalry?
You get to ride Doom.
You get a Doom wheel. And they have Doom flayers now. So Doom wheel is basically a big hamster wheel.
Yeah.
That generates lightning as it goes. So it's actually a ranged, it's really a ranged attack, but it can run over stuff.
Yeah.
Doom Flayer is basically a lawnmower with a rat on top of it.
Yeah. And it kind of does these weird spin things, which kind of disrupts. Yeah.
Yeah. They have some fast stuff, but Skaven are fast, so they don't
really have many mounts, you're actually the Doom Flayers are surprisingly slow, as I found to my cost yesterday. Anyway, the Menace from Below allows you to spawn a whole unit of clan rats wherever you like on the map at any time. Like, and it's on a cooldown, but the number of uses of it is defined by how corrupted the land is.
Yeah.
Because they're just fucking everywhere.
Yeah.
And they just come out of the earth and they will totally harry and just mess up formations. If they've got, sort of, artillery at the back, which you just can't get at in any conventional sense, because you got to go through their entire army to get to it. Fucking, there you go. I
think that's the thing that's great about
from below behind.
Because, I mean, I usually have the same problem you do with Total War games where, you start far more campaigns than you finish, and you get to the 10-hour, I've stopped having fun now. And Warhammer 2 particularly is the only game I've known that's really fixed that. And I think partly that's theme and just wanting to stick with it, but also partly it's because it gives you, like, I think particularly Skaven are good for this actually, because they have so many mechanics that, they can almost always come back. Yeah. Like, Skaven are an army that can turn a loss into a victory in a way. Like, they almost taught me how to play Total War. Like, cause I had always played Total War as if you do have to win every battle.
Yes.
And actually it is, I mean, it's never been the grandest of grand strategy games in terms of complexity, but there is an element of like, it's not about the battles, it's about the war, and sometimes just getting off the battle, like, you know what I mean? So Skaven are the faction that teaches you that retreating is a thing people do. That if you throw shitloads of stuff at some high elves and you kill 2 units of theirs, take massive casualties and run away, you've probably won, because there are always more rats and there are very rarely more elves.
Yeah.
And in the grand span of how fantasy tends to work.
And they're survivors. They're like, you think, I've thought many times that I've lost units, but actually they just ran off and I hadn't noticed.
Yeah, right. They just flee and but I think that's kind of cool because that's kind of how the game works, right? Yeah. Like you should retreat when the odds aren't good for you, but you tend to not play it that way. And this is true of a lot of kind of, it's true of, sort of XCOM or turn-based strategy games with a persistent overworld layer as well. That, I think sometimes the skill of that macro strategy is whether or not it rewards you for making the right decision in a bad moment rather than just trying to ace every single mission. Yeah. Like,
I think that's also really helped by the Under Empire sort of elements of it as well, because I remember I played in Warhammer 1, I played as dwarfs and orcs, which both of them came with caveats that I didn't really like. So the orcs have this thing where if you're not fighting, they get fucking pissed off and they start getting attrition. And if you're not, so that means you just got to keep fighting and fighting and fighting. And that's kind of then rewarded. If you fight enough, then you get the warg and then you get a free army for a powerful free army for a while. But what if I don't want to fight?
Orcs may not be for you, Alex.
What if there are all the nasty things all around me and it's not a good idea for me not to fucking turtle right now because I'm surrounded by 3 armies? Thank you very much. Like, I don't really want to smash all my fucking orcs on, and with the dwarves, they are turtly.
Yeah.
And I just found the grind is trying to work my way up to, where I needed to go next, to expand the empire. I just found it so grinding. And with the Under Empire, I feel that I can have an area that's mine, but then I can still feel like attaining stuff. I'm running out into the world. I'm gaining more money, and I can cook up plans that don't actually involve, endangering expensive armies and stuff. That's what I really liked about the Vampire Coast, which I did. And this is the last campaign I started was Vampire Coast with, Count Noctulus, and that one my computer fucked up and I lost the save. But otherwise I would have continued with that. But then they have this port thing where you can just set up, this secret pirate
Vampire
outpost at port cities anywhere in the world. And that's really cool.
But how you keep that a secret?
Yeah, I don't know, because they're ribald as hell. And also they're undead.
Yeah, exactly. The dead and pirates.
But it's been really fun. And yeah, it's been really interesting watching some videos of the new Warhammer game, which is imminent, isn't it?
Three Kingdoms.
You mean Total War Game?
Total War Game, yeah. Did I say Warhammer?
Yeah, you did say Warhammer. Yeah, it's understandable because they're almost the same word.
And it's, I was saying this to Tom earlier on, but watching them, I don't know where to look for the information because I'm just so used to the UI in Total War.
Yeah, I've been watching a few videos of this with no intention of playing it because I've never really clicked with a Total War game, purely because I love the new UI. And that was what caught my eyes. I was just looking at the clip and went, wait a minute, it's a Total Warhammer game a Total War game with a nice UI? I mean, I'm sure it's functional, the usual one, but usually it's pretty ugly. And this one is beautiful. It just looks lovely everywhere.
Yeah, there's sort of constant sort of washes of ink, like animating.
The tech tree is like a beautiful ink painting of a tree, like blossoming text coming off it. It's so cool.
Yeah, I played it a little bit at EGX last year and really liked it. Yeah, because it was just playable to the public last year. And
you can do duels, can't you?
You can do duels. That seemed good.
Yeah. And it's like heavily, like they're really, really dramatic.
Yeah. It feels like they kind of played up because there are duel animations in Total War, but they're very conditional rather than being a sort of game mechanic. It's just like, if these two characters happen to fight, this will play. But I think I also found it to be quite a lot more lethal with characters as well, that they felt more powerful. Whereas like, Warhammer does have the issue of like, a character is just a powerful unit and they will still just hit things at their own rate. You know what I mean? You don't have that real moment like, wow, that really wiped those people out. Like Warhammer, particularly with the magic system, it very rarely do you land a spell and you're like, holy shit, look what that did. Normally it's like, whoa, it's
taken off a small chunk.
Yeah. One man at the back's fallen over. Good. Oh, now you've made me want to play it again.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I did want to just quickly add another thing. I saw some chat on the Discord and also, a listener kindly, tweeted at me about, after I talked about Ascension last time I was here, the card game. And they said, try Star Realms. And so I did try Star Realms, and Star Realms is really good.
Is that
really fun?
What's the relationship?
It is, rules wise, it's almost identical, in that it's a drafting game where with a central set of cards that you're choosing from and paying them with, currency that you're earning off the cards in your hand. But in this one, rather than attacking monsters in the middle, which is one of the things you can do, you attack a health bar on your opponent, and the equivalent of the Meccana cards, construct cards, are these kind of things like star bases and things, some of which the other player must take down before being able to attack you.
Cool.
So they act as kind of like blocks, and it is really, really good. Like as soon as I started playing and thinking, this is just the same game, and I thought, but then, 10 minutes later, oh my God, this is really good. And some of the runs have just been insane. Like, it's one hand will net you like a damage of 4 against the opponent. The next one is this continually kind of stocking cards, redealing kind of, and then, hitting them for 30 damage, and feeling on top of the world until they do it to you. But it's good. It's really
is this on iPad as well?
iPad, and it's on PC as well.
Cool. I've played like 12 hours of Ascension since you brought it up on the podcast.
Sorry.
I mean, you saw immediately after we finished recording that episode, I just bought it on Steam. I shouldn't have gotten the version. I was like, oh, it's an extra couple of quid for all the expansion packs. You don't need all the expansion packs. There are so many of them. There are so many.
And I'd say, to really appreciate any individual expansion pack, it takes, I don't know.
I started doing where I would
hours.
play against the AI with the base game and an expansion pack. And then when I won that, I'd load the next expansion pack. And when I won that, I'd load the next expansion pack. And then I just realized, like, hang on, every game is now unfamiliar, and I'm just going to go back to playing with, like, the first 2 expansions or something.
And then you should do a game with all of them.
Also, the later expansion packs have different art. Yeah. They actually have like far more like modern feeling fantasy art, which is really weird because it's like seeing the movie adaptation of the world suggested in the earlier art. Like where everything is sort of like, obviously it's at a higher fidelity, but I don't know if I like it more because there's something about the core Ascension
I definitely
art
like the weirdness of the early
the kind
art.
of grotesqueness of it, and
especially when it's combined with the sound effects.
Yeah.
the sort of asp.
Oh, that the first time that came up and I killed it, it was a lovely moment. Good. Tom, what have you been playing?
I finished Heaven's Vault, which I talked about it last time I was here, but, my problems with it remain pretty much the same as they were before. Especially, like the big conversation I was pissed off about last time, which, I was told was a bug and that they fixed. I believe them, but it is also indicative of just a general trend with the game where it just kind of, every choice, I've had to learn that every dialogue thing, when you're offered 3 options, you've got to assume any one of them all of them are gone if you don't pick them. Like, that's not always true, but you have to assume it because there's no logic to when they disappear. And so it'll be like, you meet your old friend and you have this crown you want to look at, and one of the options is like, hey, can you take a look at this crown? And the other one is like, how have you been? Don't pick how you've been, because if you do that, the crown option might just disappear forever.
This is your one chance.
Yeah.
To be fair, that's quite a lot like how conversations really go, right? Like, it came around.
You can never say that again.
You forgot what you came in for. Then someone else starts talking about the thing they want to talk about, and you never get around to the thing you wanted to say.
It's, cause the game is exacerbated with that. There's just one save game. You can't ever go back to a previous save or anything, and it's auto-saving all the time, so you can basically never undo anything. So you can literally doom the whole playthrough by just thinking that when you choose option 2, you might get to ask option 3 afterwards. But if you can't, that whole thread is just closed off to you forever. So that's still frustrating. They have done a bunch of stuff that improves it. So the river stuff, there's now proper fast travel, so you can just skip that, as long as you're going to somewhere you've already been before.
You've got to navigate it to start with.
Yeah, they did they've done 2 passes at this, because the first one was, if it's all unknown rivers, then you can just skip it. You can ask your robot to do it for you. And I thought, great, okay, that solves the problem. I was playing it, went to a new location, and then on the way back, I couldn't fast travel. I'm like, what the fuck? And I look at the map, and the route is just totally different. And of course it is, because it's a massive one-way system. That's the whole thing about it, is like, these rivers only go in one direction. So your route from A to B has to be completely different to your route from B to A. And so even when you're going back to where you were, you couldn't fast travel because it's all unknown stuff. Totally new. Oh, really?
There is a logic to it.
But now they've changed that as well. So it's just like, if you've been there before, you can just skip there, which is good. They've also, massively improved, the way that you browse all the text that you haven't translated yet. Like previously it was divided into solved and unsolved, which is actually, sounds good, but it's meaningless because, 90% of the unsolved ones, you've solved them. There's just question marks on it because the game hasn't confirmed that you solved it. What you really want to know is which are the ones where I'm just missing whole words, which are the ones where I didn't know enough when I looked at it last, but now I do because I've discovered other stuff. And now they just put in a filter for that. So you can just look at ones that you can solve now. And that's really cool. So they're doing a lot to fix it. And a lot of my problems with it actually, so I finished it now and I've played it, on a New Game Plus. And New Game Plus is really interesting because you get to keep all of your knowledge of the language. Well, you get to keep all the words you know, and you still know them when you start again. And because it is so dynamic and it's always pushing you down paths and closing off paths for you, another playthrough can be quite different. And the stuff you're finding is almost all the items you're finding with inscriptions, the inscriptions are almost all completely different on the second playthrough. Like the actual, what it says on this dagger is different. There are a couple of fixed things where what it says is so tied to like what it is and where you find it that it has to be the same. But most of it is just like, oh, this is a new translation. And I think they must be doing some kind of balancing. I don't know if this is just happening naturally or if they're balancing it, but it's words that are complex enough that I can't just trivially solve them a lot of the time. It's like, because I know a lot about this language now, and it's throwing more like past tense stuff at me, which I have less knowledge of, which is amazing. That's cool that works. And then, yeah, all this stuff about closing off paths. On your second playthrough, it bothers you less, because it's like, now I'm just kind of, steering around. I know, like, you're just less invested in how this one works out. This one is just a playthrough to see, I wonder what happens if I do this, and that kind of stuff. Whereas your first time through, it's like, I was really invested in the character and I wanted it to work out in a certain way. And when it was shutting me off from that just because it thought I wanted to do something else, it was fucking infuriating. So yeah, second playthrough is just a bit more chill, and they've improved it a lot. So, do
you have a sense of how long that first playthrough took you?
I don't, because it does, we were saying earlier, Alex, that like you're worried that if you go back to it, you won't remember where you were. Yeah. And it does have this kind of previously on thing when you boot it up, but that takes like 90 seconds and you can't skip it. And I don't know, is it loading in the background? I don't remember it being like taking that long to start up the game. And so I would not shut it down. I'd just leave it running because that startup sequence was so laborious. So my Steam playtime says like 68 hours or something, which I'm sure I haven't played it that long, but I left it running a lot in between. I feel like a playthrough would be like 10 hours, maybe. My second one has been super fast because I know where to go, and a load of the content just turned out to be optional, and it's just about discovering the language really. So if you just want to get to the end of it, you can do it quickly if you know where you're going.
I must return to it because I haven't researched it since we first recorded the pod about it.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, the language stuff is so good. It's just like learning a language. Well, learning this language in this way, it's a best of both worlds thing where it feels enough like a game that it's fun and it's not daunting and brutal the way learning a real language can be. But it kind of inherits the sort of endlessly appealing nature of learning. Like, it's one of those sort of truisms about life that learning is the one thing that never gets old. It always feels good to learn something new. And it does. Like, as long as I'm learning new words, I, have an endless appetite for that. But it's also not super difficult. You can basically just kind of coast through it. And yeah, now I want to play, the game I really want to play is Indiana Jones at the Fate of Atlantis, but with all the point and click puzzles replaced with learning a language like this.
Oh god, that'd be so good.
Just be perfect. There's something that they don't do that they could have done that I'd like to see, which is, you're an archaeologist, but the game is about information. And so there's an opportunity there to like make a game where you just go and find this stuff and you just read it, and you just, like, the information is what you wanted. You've got it. You could just leave it there. You don't have to like steal everything and then take it back to. And the game does try and, it raises questions about you bringing this stuff back to this university that's on a very privileged planet and just handing it over to them. But it doesn't really go anywhere in my experience. Like, I refuse to hand it over to the university because, not for any moral reason, but just because the guy I'm talking to, if I say yes to handing over the thing I just gave him, he literally goes to the archives right then and there, and it takes him like 15 minutes to come back, and I had some other stuff to show him. It's just really boring to wait, so I just said, no, you can't have any of this, sorry. But yeah, they could have made a game where you just get the information and leave it alone, and they can make a point of that, like, I don't have the right to take this from where it is. There's one time when you can take something, you find something out there in the world and you know where it belongs and you can take it back there and give it to them. But the rest of the time it's just either deliver it to the university or keep it yourself or sell it to your friend.
Right. What else have you been playing, Tom? Was there
I also have been trying Phantom Doctrine.
Oh yeah.
Which, is, got a bit of a roller coaster with it where, it had a pretty mixed reception. The reason I haven't played it until now is that it didn't have brilliant reviews, and I heard a lot of mixed things about it.
I don't remember Phantom Doctrine at all.
It's an XCOM type game, but about spies.
Right. Yeah.
And it's very XCOM, actually. I didn't realize how XCOM until I played it. It's very much, they just took the XCOM template and filled in, you sort of put their own theme on it and added some, mechanics that suit the theme. It's such a weird initial experience because one of the first things you do is you pick basically a passport photo of your person. So picking from character portraits, which one do you want to look like? And then it takes you to the character customizer, where suddenly like, oh, I've got to make this person look like that now? Like, why isn't that your job? You gave me those options. Don't you just have like a 3D model of this person? No, I've got to fucking go and make that face. So it's like all the hard work of making a character, but none of the freedom, because I've basically, I mean, you could just make any face you like, but I felt kind of obliged to match the one I just picked. So that was a weird opening. And then it's got really like, a load of options for how you start your campaign. Like there's a CIA campaign and a KGB campaign, which I don't know how different they are, but that's pretty ambitious. And there's a third one that you can't choose because you haven't completed the other ones yet. But then there's also like, and there's difficulty modes, easy, medium, hard, but then there's also like story depth. And the default one is like a simplified story for, yada, yada. And the next one that is like the real story experience, you just can't choose it. You don't have that option. I assume that unlocks after you complete it on the simple mode, but it's like slightly insulting. It's like,
you have to watch the story
play on
twice.
the simple mode. They're like,
well, to make you like not really understand what happened, so you have to play the game again.
It's very weird. But then it gets into like what the game actually is, and it is at the very least like the template for like a dream game for me. Like it's XCOM with spies, with just that pitch alone is like, oh my god, that could be amazing. And then it does loads of stuff that's really interesting and cool. So on a mission, it's kind of got like a Hitman type thing where, you can have one person who's in disguise, and the disguise is perfect. Well, enemy agents can see through it apparently, but enemy agents are very rare. They're sort of like, I think they must be like bosses because I've only encountered like one so far. And for everyone else, your disguise is perfect. They never see through it unless you literally do something like steal something in front of them or shoot, someone. And for your agents who aren't in disguise, like the interior of the building is marked, or some interiors of the building are marked as off-limits areas, and until you go in there, you're fine. So even like the armed guards outside, you're there with your light machine gun, and they're there with their assault rifle, but you can just walk straight past them, and they won't attack you unless they see you go inside. So it's got like a, sort of almost like a crime system, like Hitman. And then you are competing objectives like, I don't know, our informant has been busted, get him out of there alive, while the enemy are sending in their agents to kill him. Oh, not agents, just soldiers. And it's extremely XCOM, like even just how your units move, even that weird XCOM quirk of like, I want to go from A to B, and your character decides to like jump through a plate glass window into a building to take like 3 steps inside the building and jump through another plate glass window to come back out. Or like, there's like a staircase right there, but they'll just throw themselves out of the building to jump down because they're allowed to. Which is great. Absolutely no complaints about that. And yeah, all the like the action points thing is mostly like XCOM, and I've been playing it like XCOM, but I've discovered there's some kind of difference I don't get. There's action points, and you have 2 of those, and you can either move a short distance and fire, or you could move the long distance. But there's also fire points, and I don't know what those are. All I know is that when one of my guys went down, and I wanted to stabilize them, I didn't have a fire point, and so I couldn't. And I think you get one every turn, but I'd used it up doing something, but I don't know what I'd used up doing. And sometimes after you move twice, sometimes you can fire again, but sometimes you can't. Like sometimes you move the long distance and fire. But it's like there aren't classes of soldiers the way there are in XCOM. There's just like weapons and individual perks and stuff. So it must be something to do with like particular kinds of weapons, or maybe training with those weapons or something. But I've been playing it for like 3 hours or something, and I still have not understood the action point system. But it does have some really cool stuff. Like you have an awareness bar for each of your troops, which is almost like, it's more like concentration or something. It's like if they take a hit, if someone shoots at them while they have full awareness, they will try and dodge it. And so it will be a grazed shot. Nothing ever misses. It's always just, does it do minimum damage or maximum damage? And if you have some awareness, then it will always do minimum damage because you dodge it. But that consumes some awareness, and now you can't dodge the next one.
So it's like a sort of the equivalent of a shield kind of thing.
Yeah, but you also use it for stuff like if you want to do a melee takedown, you need a lot of awareness. Like you have to be sort of being in control of your faculties, I guess. And if you've just been shot at a bunch, you can't run up to someone and do a melee takedown on them because you don't have your wits about you. And that system seems kind of cool and basically works because you can do stuff like you can have one character. There seems to be a special ability. I kind of wish it was universal, but one character can like just yell to another character. Like it's called like warn warn ally or something, and that restores all of their awareness. So it's like that's a kind of literal interpretation.
Getting shot is bad.
I just don't know what's going on.
Look out!
Look out! Okay, fine. That's actually that, like, you know, in movies I'm always watching them just like yell each other's name at them, like it'll be Alex, 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 and Alex knows he's in fucking danger. He's like having a fight with someone. Like, I know. Can you shut up, please? But in this game, that works.
Does that replenish their ability to do lethal melee takedowns?
Yeah. Look out! Okay,
Alex,
I'll punch this guy.
punch.
Tom, kill him with a knife. Oh, okay.
It's got another interesting mechanic with the melee where, like, because if you have enough awareness, a melee takedown just takes them out. They're down. That's it. And the only requirement is that you have to have more health than them, which is kind of interesting.
That's neat.
And there's something, they have put a lot of thought into changing those XCOM mechanics into something that makes sense for just humans with guns. Because if you unload a gun on someone, it will either kill them or it will nearly kill them. And if they're nearly dead, then now, you know, any idiot can punch them. That's what my grandma used to say. Like, it has meaning beyond just them being close to death. And that all just kind of feels right and feels good. And then, like, your weapon, you get to choose whether you use it in single shot or burst fire or full auto. And as far as I can tell, the only downside of doing full auto is it consumes more ammo. But the ammo, unlike XCOM, where it's just like your gun has 4 shots and that's it. It's just like a 30-round clip. And doing full auto costs like 7 rounds because you can do a burst of about that much. Which is a cool system and it makes a lot of sense and it's realistic. But I have never needed to reload with anyone ever. And I've read comments online from people who played it for like 25 hours, literally never had to reload, even on the hardest modes. Like, a 30-round mag is actually pretty big. Like, you're alright for the length of missions that go on. So it's got loads of cool ideas. And then, like, the optional extra things you're finding in the level are just documents that you photograph. And there are, like, lockers of kit and stuff, like, weapons and things. But the documents, when you get back to base, you get to put them on a corkboard and link them with red string. And this is like, I have to say, I was wildly excited by the system. It doesn't turn out to be what I hoped it was going to be. But it, like, the idea of actually going and, like, finding covert documents and then bringing them back and figuring out what the connection between them is in theory so exciting. And the interface for doing it just feels really nice, and it's inherently fun just to, like, put, you know, photos and classified documents and microfilms and stuff on this corkboard and move them around and draw those lines between them. It's very simplistic. It's literally just, if these two mention Brinkman, you draw a line between them, and it tells you they both mention Brinkman. And when you do that, the name Brinkman fades out, and now you've got to there'll be no other connections to Brinkman. Like, that's it.
So you're not getting leads as to where to find a document?
No, I wish it's a mix of, like, there are some of these corkboards that are, like, part of the main plot, and the documents there are, I think, handwritten for this purpose, and they, like, most of it is redacted all the time, so it's like you only get to read half the document at most. And it's all the important stuff is redacted, and there's just some mentions of code names, and you just kind of click on those to say, oh, I spotted this code name, and then that makes it an association on the corkboard that you can link. And then the rest of it is all proc gen, apparently. Like, it's just the snippets of text that you can read don't mean anything. It's just which code names they mention. The code names themselves are proc gen, or, you know, chosen from a giant list, and the connections between them don't mean anything. It's just like, the algorithm has decided it needs to come up with 13 code names, and about 7 of them are linked, and they're linked in these pairs, and that's it. So it doesn't kind of mean anything, and it's crying out for meaning. Like, it's so, if there is a story to understand, like, this is such a good way to tell it. If the story is actually there on the board, I'm right here, like, this is me speaking. I don't give a shit about your story in 90% of games, and I'm reluctant to read it, and I skip all the cutscenes and everything. But you put it on a corkboard, and I'm like, oh my god, tell me everything. I will read every word of this text.
Tell me about your world. But that is, like, the promise of that is really good, but also supported in the original XCOM, which, because you'd be going out on missions to do specific things to provide, you know, get to get a sectoid body that you could then investigate, and then which would lead to the next step in the story, or
put a bit of red string between sectoid body and sectoid. I think there could be a connection here. I shot that guy, and then there's his body here.
Aliens?
Triple question mark.
Weird looking men. Crabs? Question mark, question mark, question mark.
That's the Phoenix Point.
Yeah, that is, yeah.
Yeah.
You have to make that now. Sorry.
Your base that you go to between missions, there's like a globe map, which again is way more exciting in theory than it is in practice. Cause like the idea of like, I don't know, send your agents out on flights to investigate suspicious activity in like Tripoli and, Baghdad and, all these places sounds really cool. But it quickly becomes like just rote. It's just, I just do this. Like when this red dot comes up, I click on it and the person goes there and then they investigate or whatever. But then it has some cool stuff like if combat does break out in a mission, like you can do some missions without ever getting into an open firefight because you've got one guy in disguise. The others, can potentially just sort of stay outside the building and then like jump in to grab some documents and jump out before any guards see them.
Through several places.
Yep. Yeah, the breaking windows makes no noise, which is great. But if they do get blown, and there's a straight out firefight, then that agent, their identity is blown. And that means that as they travel around the world, there's a chance they'll be intercepted and you can't use them on recon missions and some other restrictions and stuff. And so you have to, pay to get them a new identity. And you don't have to do this, but you absolutely should always, and they should have made you do it, where you can go into the character customizer and just change what they actually look like. So you get to do all their, like, put a mustache on them, and now they've got dark glasses, and change their hair, and make them wear a different, and again, I'm so willing to engage with this, this is so what I want to be doing. So you don't, like I say, you don't have to do that. You pay the $500 and that just fixes it, but you can press another button to go into the character customizer. So I always do. I force myself to redesign, even if I just did it like the last mission, they got them blown again. And I will specifically put thought into like, the last get up I had for my guy Durand, I kind of dressed him like kind of, young, kind of, like rapper who really fancies himself and like wants to look classy, but doesn't really know how to pull it off quite yet. And then when I was redesigning him, I wanted to like, okay, now make him look kind of schlubby, like kind of give him much a more low key vibe. And yeah, I want to be thinking about that stuff and figuring out like that's what character customizers are good at. And usually you use them once at the start of the game and never think about them again. And here's a game where it actually makes sense for you to repeatedly engage with them and put thought into them and explore all the variety that they offer you. Like I actually need to create like 8 different versions of this character. Yeah. So it's full of potential and, not all of it really comes into play, but I have had a lot of fun with the missions. There's a way to do it in a really stylish way, though it feels like Hitman's meets XCOM. The game, I think, from what I hear from like people who played it more than me, the more you play it kind of degenerates into like, you can just perfectly stealth everything and you never have to engage with the combat at all. And it kind of gets repetitive that way. I haven't hit that point yet, but, I can believe it. It's definitely like the fantasy of it is so exciting that you kind of want it to work.
Yeah, I keep meaning to. I was really attracted to the theme when it came out as well, but I sort of wonder, because every single person I've heard talk about it has said, the theme and these ideas and I sort of stalled at some point, but
I wrote down some of the code names that the corkboard generated because they made me laugh. A key figure in one of my corkboards is Backdoor Man. It's hard to ignore him. Someone is just called Unusual Arms.
Either very long or very short.
Another person's code name is Jive Cop.
There you go. There's a new class for you.
Yeah, that's a Breach Wizard's character, Tom.
As if we're not in enough hot water already. And then another one is Diphthong.
Diphthong.
Yep.
Amazing.
Good.
What have you been playing, Chris?
I have been playing Mordhau.
Mordhau?
Mordhau.
How Mord?
Mordhau. How Mord? How Mord? You die by getting decapitated with a bardiche by a man called Liberal Wrecker.
Is it a multiplayer game?
Yeah, it is. Okay. But that's really skipping to the end. That's really skipping to the end of this, thing. So Mordhau is doing very well right now. It's been in early access for a fair old time, I think. I think it was kickstarted. It is a sort of spiritual successor to games like Chivalry, some medieval combat simulators. Big multiplayer medieval combat simulator. I picked it up because I do love sword fighting games, and I'm always like, if it's got a sword fighting system in it, I will play it. This feels like an adaptation of both Chivalry, with a little touch of Kingdom Come Deliverance's sort of multi-directional sword swinging.
What about For Honor?
For Honor's, somewhat, but For Honor is very much its own game. For Honor is I really like For Honor, but it's, it feels more like a fighting game in some ways. It's obviously it's 3-dimensional and it's third person and the rest of that, but like, For Honor isn't concerned with sort of granular, muddy reality in the way that, Chivalry is and Kingdom Come is and this is. And it's great. It's really, really, really good. I'm really impressed with it, and I've played a bunch of it. I picked it up 2 days ago, yesterday, maybe. And it's very much like the thing I want to play, all the time, for a bunch of reasons. And first and foremost, I think it's just a really technically impressive, combat sandbox. So that's kind of what it all comes down for. All of its modes, everything is just about how robust that central kind of combat system is. So you can choose from a selection of classes, but all a class is like a particular loadout of armor, weapons and gear and those kinds of things. You're very much encouraged to build your own character, basically. And it's almost like kind of, even though it's a multiplayer game, it is almost like a kind of like character creation system. You have like 16 points to spend, and everything costs points, from armor to weapons to traits that you might give your character, and you just figure out how you're going to distribute those points based on what you want. And then you unlock more options for your character. And that kind of gear spans like the whole range of, medieval weaponry that you expect. Different kinds of swords, spears, bardishes, poleaxes, lances. Actually, no, lances are a pickup. Spears, lots of different kinds of, shields, bows, crossbows, gadgets. There's a loot for some reason. Like,
There's a bard class.
There is, basically.
Yeah.
And some sort of gadgets like firebombs and smoke bombs and things. And, all of this stuff is, simulated. Lots of it has sort of alternate sort of, modes of use. It's all based on sort of real medieval warfare. A Mordhau grip is when you hold the sword backwards and hit people with the hilt. That's what that's called. That's why, hence the name of the game. But the way the sandbox it all feeds into is extremely granular, and given the scale of it and how well it runs, really impressively, physics driven. So when you say like a physics driven combat game, you think like Gang Beasts or, you know what I mean? That kind of, but really it is. So, it's a 64-player multiplayer game. And at any given time, it's simulating to an accurate degree the exact position of every blade, every projectile, everything. Everything is not, even though, you can swing your sword in, I think, 8 directions. So you'll have, you have sort of, it depends on the direction the mouse is moving in when you click, basically. So, the direction your mouse is moving in is the direction you will move the sword in order to prepare for the strike. So to do a blow that goes up to down, you move the mouse up, because that's the direction you'd be moving the sword to prepare to bring it down. I'm doing some mimes here, but not really for the podcast. And so that is the sort of the wind up, and then the blade comes down, and then so that is not, it's not like you're not drawing the blade in the air, but wherever it is in the air is where the blade is. There isn't a moment where the blade suddenly does damage, where it enters its sort of like, it's not a secret gun. A lot of this is a first or third person game. I've mostly been playing it in first person. A lot of first person melee weapons are secret guns, right? They're guns with one unit of range. These are not. When the blade is doing its thing, as soon as it is being swung after being prepped, it is then capable of doing damage. And however you are moving in the course of that animation, will change, accelerate or decelerate the progress of that phase of the slice, essentially. And anything it collides with is collided with, basically. So you can't do an overhead swing in a corridor with a low ceiling. Like, the blade will just bounce off the ceiling above you and it will reset the animation.
Okay. So it doesn't like get stuck behind you.
It can do.
Really?
It can drag, and you can slow you down for a frame.
This is a totally accurate battle simulator.
Yeah, like, I think what's really impressive about it is it has a touch of that, but it doesn't end up slapstick, which is really rare for a game like this. Like, if you're fighting someone in a corridor, it will naturally become a game of thrusts. And, you know, because it is hard to swing a 3-foot longsword in a corridor. Like every other.
Do you like drag down for a thrust?
No, it's weird. It's mouse wheel forwards.
Oh.
Because it's actually considered a completely different sort of attack. Yeah. And this is obviously ties into a parry system, several different kinds of parry system. There's a feint system, and there's a way to change one particular kind of attack into a different kind of attack. So, you know, I could talk for a while about, like, I'm still learning it, but there's so much granularity just in a one-on-one duel situation in terms of how many options you have, why it matters what kinds of weapons you're carrying, and also really granular damage. So, you can, like, the level of detail is kind of amazing. Like, there's been stuff that's happened in it that I've never seen done in a game like this before. So, you can lose, your hand at the wrist. And depending on which hand it is, you maybe can keep fighting until you bleed to death. Like, you know, if you lose your left,
flesh wound.
if you lose your left wound, if you lose your left hand, or if you take your left hand off your opponent, they might drop their shield, but they can keep swinging your sword for a bit. You can take a leg off below the knee. That usually, I mean, obviously a head coming off is
it's a drawback.
That's a drawback. But like, there, you know, it has these kind of moments where something connects at a very specific angle, and it feels like right that that's what just happened. It's not like, you know, obviously it is just factoring in like headshot damage and things like that, but there's a real sense that, you know, blades coming at each other from a certain angle will clash in midair with each other. There's a parry system which is a little bit more forgiving than that in terms of what it allows you to do. There's also a stamina system and a health system, so you run out of health, you die. But if you run out of stamina, which is basically it's really nice, it costs stamina to block stuff, and it costs stamina to attack if you miss, which is really a nice system because it means that it costs you to swing wild, but it pays off if you land every blow. You can keep fighting for a long time, which feels right. If you run out of stamina, I think it's the next hit disarms you, so your weapon falls to the ground and you can pick it up. You can also pick up, it's kind of nuts. Like, I had this crazy moment, and I've discovered a lot of these systems. There's a tutorial, but I've discovered a lot of these systems just by kind of playing with it. I made my own character, and he carries a bastard sword and a targ shield, like a target shield, like a little parrying shield, which, unlike a lot of shields, can't be held up constantly. Normally, like, if you're parrying with a weapon, the parry window is like a flash. Like you right click and then you get this sort of moment of, as long as you're angling it correctly, the ability to turn a blow. Most shields, the exception, they allow you to hold the shield in front of you, apart from this one, which allows you to just bring it up quickly, but it does cover a wider surface area. So it's useful for that reason. It's also useful because if I'm using my bastard sword with a two-handed grip, it goes on my back, and while it's on my back, it's still a shield. It still does all the things a shield would do. It's just on my back, which is actually handy, and I'm paying some points for that, which could also be a trait. Like, that's a cool trade-off. Really like that stuff. But I had this crazy moment where I was like, running towards this sort of postern gate in a castle, and this other, like, heavily armored knight runs out towards me. Then he sheathes his sword and pulls a dagger and throws it at me. And I managed to sort of, like, pull up the shield just in time, and the dagger sticks in the shield. And then I noticed that the dagger had the interaction glow around it. And I just pressed the use button, and I take the dagger out of the shield. Now I have the dagger. And then I threw it back at him. And like, I didn't land it, but it was like, holy shit. Like, I noticed that sometimes arrows stick in you if you get shot with an arrow, and it's glowing. And it's because you can collect it. Like, that.
Thanks for the loot, asshole.
Didn't even have to go bend over to pick this one up. And there are so many, like, little, like, details like that, which aren't easy to simulate. Like, to have, you know, an object sticking out of a player be a collectible, be treated the same way by the game is really neat, particularly because it's a very good looking game. It runs in an Unreal Engine. It's very detailed, you know, nice lighting, and it runs really well, and it is simulating these big battles. So there's a battle royale mode, which is an entertaining total shit show, in that you just find these little treasure chests and you kick them open and you just find whatever's in there and you try and kill people with them. And it takes a little bit too long to load, I think, so I don't really kind of enjoy it, just as like, it's addictive because all battle royale is addictive, but the meat of it for me has been sort of, I think it's getting a duel mode eventually. at the moment it's this mode called Frontlines, which is basically Battlefield. It's basically fantasy Battlefield. It's control points and tickets and stuff, and siege weapons, and she's got catapults, and there's a class that can build stuff, so they can build barricades. You can play as an archer if you like, which just feels completely different. Like, you're so vulnerable, but you hang at the back firing arrows into melees. And then the rest of the time it's this mad, huge, just vast, multi-man melee that's going on it takes a while. Like, a match can take like half an hour. And it's attritional and really interesting, partly because it has friendly fire. Because that system wouldn't really work without it. There's a trait you can take called friendly, which means that you take less damage and deal less damage from your allies. And it's basically kind of recommended for new players because when people start running in and swinging their swords, they don't realize that, like, when I talk about the entire arc of the sword mattering, like, I remember, like, one of my first, like, really great, like, oh yeah, got that guy thing was like coming in, parry, swing my bastard sword and a two-handed grip and a huge arc to take his head off, and also took the head off the ally standing next to him. So I gained 100 points for the enemy kill and lost 100 points for the friendly kill. Like, it will fully let you do that. And so that means that what starts as this, I think, it's extremely unforgiving. Like, you die very quickly. You might choose not to wear a helmet to save some points or to stay a bit lighter so you move faster. But then arrow hit you in the head, you've died. Like, and there are so many things.
How does it deal with armor? Like, is it just mitigate, or
it's light, medium, and heavy armor, and I believe it responds differently to different kinds of damage. So you can have like hammers and maces and things. They do better against heavy armor, but they also stop when they hit something, whereas a sword doesn't necessarily stop when it hits something. So, like, a sword can cleave through several things before the attack swing stops, whereas a hammer stops on connection with the first thing it hits. Armor also slows you down. So, like, I've opted for wearing like a medium helmet because I don't like getting arrows in the head, a heavy breastplate, and then light arms and legs so that I can stay a bit quick, and I can take a risk if someone chops my legs out from underneath me, but it's kind of worth the balance. And it's kind of cool making those decisions.
You look like a sort of barrel with sort of arms and legs.
No, actually, the cosmetics are quite nicely matched, so you can kind of create a look that looks about right. Like, I look like a sort of Norman knight now. But yeah, so you start off sort of just running around and accidentally hitting your friends a lot and being very confused and getting killed quickly. There are also horses, so you can mount a horse and ride around murdering people from horseback, which feels great, landing a sword swing and taking a head off. But also then you eventually realize the strategy of, like, this mobile sort of front line of battle. Like, unlike a lot of melee games, it actually does manage to, I think, maintain a sense of where the front line is at any given point. And there are obviously flanking maneuvers and things, but no one wants to get ganged up on. And it's almost like, in terms of, so you have this,
you tend to stay with,
you have this very, extremely granular and detailed ground level. I mean, this is a little bit like Chivalry, I suppose, but like ground level, sword fighting game, which is interesting even if you're just fighting another player in a completely isolated environment. But when you suddenly got like 30 players around you, and it's constantly breaking out into like 1-on-1s and 2-on-1s that maybe end in a death, but maybe just reset, and people are sort of vying for these openings and things, it's really, really exciting. And it creates these moments as well where if you manage to momentarily beat the odds, either through just playing well or a bit guile, there are tricks and traps. You can like bear traps. There's loads of other gadgets and stuff you can do. Like, like trying to sneak, like crouch and sneak around back to try and get into their archers and just start like chopping up archers can be really fun. I've managed to win like 3v1 ever. So when I was on my own against 3 people, and that feels amazing because you're sort of trying to parry everything as it comes in and then like jab to kill one of them. And it feels properly like Game of Thronesy, actually. Like that's the sort of the vibe. It feels really good when that happens, because also it means that you've sort of beaten the odds at a particular corner of the front line, and then everything else sort of like pushes in behind that. The downside to it is, in the time I've been playing it, I've never seen the team that gains the early advantage lose. Like, it does feel like a very one-way slog, and I'm not sure how you come back when you're sufficiently behind on tickets and respawns, essentially, for your team. But so far, I am really, really enjoying it. The only sort of downside I attribute to it, and I get the impression, like, I don't want to totally say, like, it's sold like 500,000 copies already. Like, it's done really, really well. And not every single one of those people is going to be a bellend. But it has a bit of a toxicity issue in chat already. It's very, very prevalent. And I don't know particularly why. I could guess why, but it feels like that comes with this particular territory.
Yeah, I do.
Like the medieval combat game. You know, it's, like you
Feels
see,
like the crowd who love this stuff. Well, some of the crowd who love this stuff are also the people who are like, oh, you shouldn't have this race in it because it's not historically accurate. Well,
so, the funniest and saddest button in this game is skin color. You literally press skin color for your character because it has character customization, and you get 8 little blocks of colors to choose from, and all of them are white.
heard it.
You can only be a man. You know, you can only be a white man, basically, a bulky white man. You can pick your voice and you can yell because you can press V to scream, basically, which is also from Chivalry. And there is one voice that's called foppish, that you can, which is the best one. And so, because it is, you know, sort of like lightly camp English lord. So you can run around screaming, "Dodge this, you bastards!" Which, is worth doing if only to kind of like try and take away from the kind of hyper macho.
Is it American?
No. I don't know exactly where, I don't want to guess, basically. But yeah, like not to pussyfoot around it. Like I wasn't joking at the start when I said that I've literally been decapitated and then seen the anime avatar come up with the username of my killer being literally like wrecker of liberals. And it's like, it's, you know, for fuck's sake, like, earlier in a game I was playing, I saw a guy whose name was Cancer Boy spamming the phrase, "I'm definitely hetero," over and over and over again in chat. And it's like, for fuck's sake, like,
Toxic Communities 101.
yeah, it's like, you're not even trying very hard. This is like, it's got, and I say this because, and I say this with one caveat, which is like, the guides I've read, like, cause it's got me interested enough in its system that I go away and read about it. And the guides I've read come across as, you know, very engaged and mature. And actually in sword fighting games previously, you often find people who get really into it, like, don't exhibit any of those issues. But there's something about the theme, I think particularly this sort of European medieval warfare thing, that attracts a certain breed of arsehole. And I don't know any amount of theorizing why, but it's a bit of a shame because it does feel quite like, kind of like an ugly place to spend time just because of the quality of the chat. It doesn't help that the default character model in, Battle Royale looks like topless Vladimir Putin. And so there's a lot of that. It's a lot of like, and then while you're queuing for a Battle Royale game to start, you are allowed to run around and punch each other, but you're not allowed weapons, so it is just punching. So like the start of any other Battle Royale game is like this wet slapping noise. It's like half a dozen Vladimirs smack each other in a lumber mill. And then you load in, and then like a man called, you know, like fucking, you know, Wang 69 Megaforeskin throws a spear at you, and then it's over when you load for 5 minutes. Like, it's not, I really want to recommend it. And actually, this is the reason I spoke for like 10 minutes about how good its combat system is because there's a really fundamentally very, very good game there, and I do want to keep playing it, but I also feel like I would be remiss not to mention that it doesn't feel like the most welcoming place. And I suspect that because the type of game it is, because it's so technical, it suffers tremendously from like the bell end curve, which is,
That's good.
which is that, you will find a lot of new players coming into the game that don't want to mimic the tone of maybe, you know, the broader or the most vocal elements of the community, who simply play in silence and enjoy themselves. And then at the top end of the game, you're going to have players who take it very seriously. You probably talk in the jargon of the game, but have no interest in that toxicity either, because they're the ones who bow before a sword fight and say GG afterwards. And then in the middle, you have the bell end hump of like people who are halfway good at the game, and they're only in there to teabag other players after they've successfully lopped the head off with a bardiche. And, that's kind of what it is. But I also can see why it's been so successful, because it feels like the promise of that kind of really kind of granular, sort of sword fighting thing, lots of blood and gore and mud and that kind of not low fantasy because it's historical, I suppose, but that feel is very, very well executed. Like, it almost feels like if someone had just layered a Game of Thrones skin over it, they would have, maybe profited from being able to detach it somewhat from the kind of uglier ramifications of its real historical reference points. Yeah. It's like Battle of the Bastards. Battle of the Arseholes.
Yeah.
Battle of the Bell Curve.
Yeah. But I definitely want to play loads more of it, and I think it could potentially be really fun just to knock about it with friends as well. That's what I haven't done yet, is play it with friends. I'd really like to just roam around as a group, kind of getting into scrapes and things. You can also throw a lot of weapons regardless, and there's nothing like just
I'm listening.
throwing. just like I was in a really long duel with a guy, and I ended it by just throwing my falchion at him overhand, and it stuck in his head, and it was so good. I had to go and pull it out, and it's like, yeah.
Do you have to like put a foot on their body to pull it out?
Unfortunately not, but you can imagine it. Yeah, there are so many kind of it does the thing that Battlefield does of like, oh wow, like this is a war moment, Battlefield's very cinematic. That's a sort of on the fly cinema of like, oh, the plane went really low. It does that, but with like, holy shit, that ballista bolt went right past my head. Or even the better version of that is like you're dueling a guy for ages, then like a massive ballista bolt goes through him and pins him to a wall, and you're like, yeah, and you turn around and it was actually friendly fire, cause and then he's in the chat like, fucking take it.
Thanks, backdoor man.
It's a lethal ballista. It's backdoor man. But yes, that's, Mordhau. It's good.
That's a Mordhau.
When the knife hits your shield, like.
Okay. Take another drink.
Tensions are bro.
Chris, should we do something?
I didn't actually take a drink. I only pretended to take a drink. Checkmate.
Regardless,
yeah.
Should we do some questions?
I suppose we must. We have a lot of questions because we missed a week. So apologies if we don't get to your question in the time that we have allotted for this process. Also, through the selection process, we've managed to guarantee that more than half of the questions we're going to answer are not about cutlery. Ollie writes, hi all, I'm doing my PhD on how religion is depicted in works of science fiction, including a few sci-fi video games. So far, I've looked at Mass Effect, Dead Space, and Subsurface Circular. As I do my research, I'm realizing that religion is something that a lot of games tend to shy away from, apart from its frequent portrayal as an antagonist, in the form of some kind of evil church faction. What are some of the most interesting depictions of religion in video games of any genre? Are there any fictional religions in games that have stuck with you? And do you think there's room for games to explore religion in more interesting ways? Personally, I like to see more occasions where the player can actively engage with religious ceremonies, rather than remaining a passive observer. The recent indie game Ritual of the Moon comes to mind, which was featured in Alice Bell's diary on RPS. Thanks for the tasty pods, Ollie. That's a good question.
I immediately thought about, especially with the reference to Ritual of the Moon, Michael Brogue's Vesper 5, which I played it daily for a couple of months, really, as a sort of like a. Do you know?
No.
So there's a game where you get to move. It's a sort of it's like a grid-based game. And you get to make one move, like a single tiles move in any direction, on a day.
Right.
And then next day you can move again. And
It's like a daily challenge, but
it's like a daily challenge, but like one action. Yeah. And, you'll see kind of things to look at, and the interactions are minimal, as in you'll see a flower and you go up to it and you'll just see, when you finally reach it, 2 weeks later, it will just show you a close-up picture of that flower, and that'll be it. But there's something about its slowness, which is really related to games like Animal Crossing, which kind of hint or involve you in an incredibly simplistic world, but expand it by just restricting it, and, according to the course of time, that it felt like a ritual, like a something that has a meaning outside itself and something that one can devote oneself to. And like, obviously its name Vesper is kind of quite an explicit reference to
mopeds.
To mopeds, yeah. But that was the close one. Like, as soon as the first few sentences of the question, like the first thing I was sort of thinking about was like religion, games, worlds, like game stories aren't very good at religion because religion has to involve the player. Like you have to, it's about belief and it's about long-term relationships. But of course games can construct belief and you do need to apply a sort of sense of kind of like willingness to kind of comply and to sort of put effort into something outside of oneself in the same, in like Vesper is a sort of like a really sort of chiseled kind of perfect example of that. Like, playing a daily challenge or an MMO, like there is a sort of a ritualistic element to it. I think what you kind of miss is the sort of the belief in the sense of the game giving you an answer to existence that, or maybe they do. Like games don't to me, but maybe they did once. I don't remember that.
Yeah, it's interesting. The depiction of religion in games, now that you mention it, it can only really depict a religion you don't believe in, right? It's always, if it's a fictional religion, it's never going to be one that the player themselves, is a believer in. And it's unlikely that the game itself is going to convert you to their religion because it's a thing they fucking made up for a video game. So it's going to, not hold that kind of weight. Even if they, if it was incredibly well fleshed out and had a sort of good kind of message and a code to live your life by, just the very fact that it's in a video game is going to, make you be extremely skeptical of it. And so they can only ever show religion from an outsider's perspective. And I don't know, that's interesting because as the questioner notes, that's usually kind of vilified. Like if it's a religion that the player doesn't believe in and the developers don't believe in it either because they just made it up, it's kind of a false religion almost by definition. Like if it's saying some factual thing about the world, it must be wrong. And so it's an easy thing to vilify. I wonder if there's anything more you can do than that. I mean, you can make a sympathetic religion where like what it's teaching people is a generally positive way to live. But in terms of its like story about how the world was created and gods and things like that, it's always going to be, here's a lie.
Yeah, I think, I can think of a few examples. Like I think, Tides of Numenera has a lot of, as in the second Torment game, has a bunch of really cool sort of, ritualistic set pieces and things, because that fiction is very much about people finding weird ways of engaging with ancient technology, and so it is sort of a sci-fi universe, but the way that manifests in the present for a lot of characters is various forms of sort of ritual and faith. And again, it's not going to sort of convince you to adopt any of them, but there's a bunch of good sort of philosophical positions adopted, and I think those particular types of games are very good at that, like adopting a philosophical position and attaching a character to it and giving you an opportunity to have a dialogue with it. I was thinking about it, and actually I sort of agree with what you're saying that, like, the player's not going to believe themselves. I think a game that has at least allowed you to effectively roleplay that if you want to is Dragon Age Inquisition. And the reason it works is because if this kind of depends on you. So in that game early on, something miraculous happens to you and people start to believe that you must be some kind of messianic figure, and the choice is given to you about whether or not, how you feel about that. And based on the kind of character you've built, you can also say whether or not your character shares the faith of the people who believe that. Because obviously if you are a messianic figure, you're a messianic figure within one particular faith. in the world. And you could easily be from a background that you wouldn't even have that faith. So why would you believe this? But you're allowed to, role play that and make choices to that effect, how you feel about it. And nonetheless, you have to engage with it quite a lot. But one of the reasons it works, I think, is because they had 2 games of build up to kind of set up that faith and that sort of religious system. And I think Dragon Age is ultimately quite a mechanical fantasy universe in some ways. Like the way magic works is very tied to intention with religion in that world. And there's a sort of the ongoing mystery to the point where they got it towards the end of Dragon Age Inquisition, and its DLC is the point where you start to uncover some like fundamental truths that underpin the world that sort of put you in a position of privileged knowledge about what really happened. And so you end up with this sort of like really long view of, oh, this faith has come about because of these particular events at particular times, and these details were squashed and these details were elevated. But I think giving you all that, having it be back matter for 2 games and then foreground matter in the 3rd game is actually kind of a neat way of giving you an opportunity to decide, actually, I do believe this. And that doesn't feel like an act of pure, like, just random role play, because I've had 2 games to understand what it is I'm claiming to believe.
Games like the messianic sort of, aspects of religion, like games to, like Dragon Age is definitely playing off the Ultima kind of set piece of you as the avatar, and
it is,
and it seems quite explicitly playing off it, like
because it is
commenting on it,
undermining it, like it's
because in Ultima you're pretty much accepting that you are the dude.
Yeah, right. Like that's one thing that Dragon Age did consistently, is sort of make it matter less where you're from. Like you are a special person in each game, but through circumstance rather than destiny necessarily. It's quite a sort of anti-destiny series in a way.
It's quite interesting.
Which is why you're not allowed to say destiny in the Power Off.
I'm working on a book about sort of 1980s Japanese game developers at the moment, and is interested. A lot of the RPG developers, like the people who founded the JRPG back in the sort of early to mid 1980s, they were all responding to Wizardry and to Ultima, and quite a lot of them sort of just happily took a lot of the signifiers of messianic signifiers that were in those games, and made them explicitly Christian, reference Christian things. And when not many of them, but few of them were localized into English, and a lot of that had to be stripped out because it was too close. Like, there are references to Satan and stuff like that, which just doesn't, especially in those days, like just didn't translate.
Right.
Very well. It's really interesting. I was just going to say, did you want to?
No.
I was going to. There's 6 Ages, which still isn't on PC, but 6 Ages is very much about interpretation of religion, like about
King of Dragon Pass is on PC, right?
Yes, it is. And I guess actually, no, that does have shitloads of gods. Actually, it's the same.
A lot of fucking gods.
It's the same one. Shitloads of gods. And
I've worked with all ants, let me tell you.
Yeah. And actually, it's the same mythological space in 6 Ages. So it's the same point where you are interpreting myths and you are thinking about what they might be actually explicit, like what things happened in history and what.
So Dragon Pass has a thing where you need to learn basically kind of the scripture of what happened in the gods, because at some point you're going to go on a vision quest kind of thing. And during that, you'll be asked, oh, you're in this situation. What do you do? And the correct answer is what that person did do in that situation in the scripture.
Because you're kind of reenacting
it. If you don't remember it, you're fucked.
Yeah.
And I've screwed that up multiple times.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know, it makes it pushes narrative into the gameplay space and makes you, for gameplay reasons, you must learn this narrative. It's a bit of a gun to your head approach. It's like, fucking read this shit or we will kill you.
Yeah, read this shit and we're going to ask you questions about it.
Yeah. Whereas like the corkboard thing I was talking about earlier, the Phantom Doctrine, the ideal of that is that you're naturally motivated. Like, I want to learn this stuff because it will let me do this extra thing.
But in fact, you're just clicking on all anth.
Yeah.
And it's just showing you all anth
links to Backdoor Man. both in league with Jive Cop.
I was going to say, I imagine I have mentioned this a kabillion times, but and Mass Effect was already mentioned in the question. But I remember it really striking me at the time when I played Mass Effect 1 when I was 20, that like I had never played a game where there was a Christian in it, and they were just Christian. They weren't space religious. They weren't made up religious. They were simply religious in a way that people are religious. And I thought that, I mean, I haven't played a game for a while, but that's Ashley Williams in Mass Effect 1 will just explain to you that she believes in God. And, and you can even say to her, like, does the fact that we're flying around in a spaceship with
but look at the
dinosaurs,
sun! We're going past!
and she goes, nope. And it's kind of like,
that solves that.
Well, but it's like, you're kind of, it's a rare example, I think, and it's one of the reasons I like that character so much, but like, of a game just saying like, people have faith and it's not really there for you to pick apart and challenge and decide, to like demand that you get told everything about it. It's just a sort of fact of people's lives, and it is part of a longer relationship. I think that's one thing it does quite effectively, is evoke the sense that this is a person with a history that precedes you by their lifetime, and as a result, they come with relationships that you are not there to fix, which is, or not always. BioWare don't always do that. You arrive in people's lives as the messianic figure who fix every
including the Mass Effect series.
Yeah. Mass Effect 2 had this problem. I've talked about this so much, but like, it's one of the things that's good about Mass Effect 1 is it doesn't ask you to fix everybody in quite the same way. And I think Ash is a good example of that. The big conflicts of her life have actually already happened by the time you meet her, and she has this faith. And that's, I think, quite an interesting kind of idea that they never really return to in any other context. The other kind of game that I guess sort of, or the series or type of game that has, I think, effectively given you the opportunity to kind of discover and explore a belief system. Alex, I'm going to need you to toot for me here.
Toot toot.
Yeah, it's Dark Souls, everyone.
The lowest hanging of the flutes.
Yeah. And also Sekiro and Bloodborne. From Software games basically do this, and as everyone knows, because we bang on about them constantly, but like, that I would say is, like, the sort of, maybe the thing that unifies all of them, from Dark Souls through Bloodborne through Sekiro, is like, you get kind of welcomed into the sort of, a place that is itself the kind of, that represents the legacy of a belief system at exactly the point where it starts to fall apart. And then you're encouraged to kind of, be there and sort of experience it and figure out like what has been lost and what is being lost, as it kind of all falls apart around you, partly because you will not stop knifing the principal players in this drama. But nonetheless.
There's one more thing I wanted to mention about this, because my first thought when I read this question was about the Elder Scrolls series and Morrowind, where you're in the land of the Dark Elves, and the Dark Elves have their own religion, and they're kind of being semi-occupied by the Imperium, or the Empire, and they have the Imperial religion. And it's not that either of those is especially compelling or interesting to me, but just the fact that there's two of them and they conflict, and you can study either of them, and you also have like sort of quest lines to go on to sort of basically express that you want to go on this path, immediately makes them more just feel more real and have more character to them. As soon as there's two religions, any one of those religions has more character and meaning to it, and it's
right. And I suppose
to see it through.
And I suppose that one also, can we formally say that any game where that hangs a lot of its role-playing kind of meat off the question, are you actually the Messiah, is functionally like a Life of Brian narrative, right? So Dragon Age Inquisition is a Life of Brian narrative, but so is Morrowind.
I'm not the Messiah, I'm a very naughty boy.
Yeah, I'm not the Nerevarine. I've stolen all your glass daggers.
They'll give you the option to not be the Messiah and be a very naughty boy.
Yeah, exactly. Or both. I am the Messiah and I'm a naughty boy. We've all read that fan fiction.
Yeah, to me that's an unfortunate thorn in the side of Morrowind anyway.
Oh, right, yeah.
I don't want to be the fucking Messiah. I just want to study these religions.
Yeah. The Vivek stuff in Morrowind's fucking great. Is it the Chronicles or the Canticles of Vivek? So the endless, religious texts of the Dhamma.
Would it surprise you to learn I didn't read them?
Oh, man, they're really good.
I fucking punched Vivek himself to death, but I didn't read the books about him.
There's a lot of really good, just sort of evocative, religious text craft in that game. I believe written by like one developer over the course of like a real long weekend. I think I've read that. That might be apocryphal, but yeah.
Is it maybe Ken Rolston?
I think so, yeah.
Because I remember, I think I was reading like an oral history of, was it Morrowind or one of the others? And he was sort of talking about how, like, it all came from, the Elder Scrolls universe came from just the D&D campaign that those guys used to run. And he was brought on to be like the world builder who would come and take that to be like, okay, let's flesh it out and let's actually, fill in the details.
Yeah, right. Which is how all good narrative design starts.
Yeah.
Very much is. Cool. Next question comes from David, who writes a long email, but with some important insight. I'm going to summarize a little bit. But he starts, after hearing in episode 280 how the cutlery controversy has driven rivens between our two countries, I thought I would apply my knowledge of corpus linguistics learned at your University of Birmingham, no less, to help calm these transatlantic tensions. So, after consulting the corpus of contemporary American English and the British National Corpus, I found that both American English and British English appear to favour saying knife and fork over fork and knife, although the available evidence shows that Brits are much less likely to say fork and knife than Americans. He then has a few bones to pick with previous emailer Sam about the prevalence of the phrase fork and knife in America, and adds that knife and fork and knife are both collocations. One is a prefab. We won't get into the details of this. There's a thing. We can keep falling down this cutlery hole.
That is a thicket.
But we probably shouldn't get into linguistics because that is the place beyond pointless arguments where house parties end at 3 a.m.
Place beyond the tines.
Yeah. But hopefully, David adds, the fact that we both typically say knife and fork will help us move past this divide and focus on the real issue, people who use a knife and fork to eat pizza. These people have made a category error and should have ordered a calzone instead. Anyway, my question was actually inspired by a comment Chris made in the same episode about pizza not being worth the price of what went into it. The same complaint is often levelled at games. While many people seem to be content to plunk down $60 or what have you on a AAA game, some games from smaller studios are frequently derided as not being worth the price, even though they cost much less. What are your thoughts on smaller devs pricing their games so that customers feel they're getting their money's worth and the devs get a fair price for the work that they do? How does the wide availability of free games affect this? Keep on podding, David.
I can talk about the indie game pricing thing because obviously I think about it a bunch. And I think it's basically reassuring that like free games exist, and also like games that cost 1 cent exist, and bundles exist, and all these things have existed for ages. The Humble Bundle is old now. It's old enough to have been bought up and kind of morphed into something else. And it did not kill indie game sales. It didn't mean that you can't charge $15 for your game. And the thing I keep seeing, and it's definitely more true now than it was sort of 5 or 10 years ago, that if your thing is, the, like, new, if there's buzz around it and people want to play it, like, right now, they will pay for it, even though literally everybody knows it will be 1 cent at some point, or, and these days that's less true because, the Humble Bundle is less of a thing. There was a time when, like, every major successful indie game was going to be a Humble Bundle at some point.
Yeah.
Now, that's not true, but it will be 85% off on Steam at some point, and you will be able to get it super cheap. And it doesn't seem to cause a problem. It doesn't seem to, I haven't seen Gunpoint sales, suffer any, dip over that kind of thing. And it's just that definitely there's an increased burden on you as a developer to make your thing not just good, but like, oh, you have to play this. Like, it's got to be special. And, that's always been somewhat true, and it's just getting more and more true. But yeah, there's also this weird sort of delusion, I think, around indie game pricing where, like, if it's really good and it offers you a lot of stuff, then the developers ought to be allowed to charge a really high price. Or like developers will say, you know, they'll release their game at $35 or something and it doesn't sell. And they say, well, we had to charge $35 because we put in so much work and we put in so much effort and we deserve to be rewarded for that. And I agree that if they did a good job and they put in a load of work, they deserve to be rewarded for that. But the way you get rewarded for that is to just price it at whatever people are willing to pay for it, and then you'll make more money. Like, the price per copy is utterly irrelevant. It means nothing. It has no relevance to your reward or your effort or anything like that. What matters is how much money did you make from the game? And did people, like, if you made a good game and people buy it and enjoy it, and you priced it such that you get more money out of that, that's being rewarded for your hard work. Like, getting $35 per copy is a meaningless accolade. Who cares what you got per copy? All that really matters is, did you make enough to make another game? And it's a weird point of pride for some people that they really want to have a super high price on their particular game. And when people are telling you that's too high and they want you to charge less, you would get more rewarded if you charge less.
There is a sort of a value association with certain price points that kicks in. That's almost what AAA means. Like, AAA doesn't mean a lot in terms of budgets, or at least not a consistent amount. The most consistent thing it means is $60, 45 quid, really. You know, in terms of what you expect, you know, the money involved to be and what kind of production values you expect. Like, there's no standard in terms of the length or duration of those games. There's no standard in terms of the modes offered or the amount of stuff.
Well, yeah, like, there's a thought experiment. Like, you imagine Rockstar's next game being released at $12.99. Like, I believe in your argument, Tom. Like, Rockstar would probably make as much money on a $12.99 game.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying that. I don't know if that's.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe, possibly that would happen. But I think the main reason they price it at 50, 60 quid, is about the prestige that comes with that. It's the expectations that sets up, the relationship.
I think in that case, they do make more money at that price point than they would if they charged
because of the sheer volume. Yeah, because it's one of those games. But, like Days Gone, a game that always seemed to me, it's been quite popular actually, but a game that seemed to me to be sort of entirely unnecessary.
The rest of us.
But if that got released at $12.99, yeah. Anyway, yes.
Yeah, but I know what you mean. It feels like...
there is a psychological association with the price point.
Like, maybe a different version of the same example would be if they said, okay, PlayStation 5, every game with PlayStation 5 is going to be £20. Like, that would be a kind of a weird situation where it's like, oh, so it's only cheap games.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have big games on it. And like, no. Call of Duty on this one is 20 quid. Oh, so it's
it's just the Battle Royale mode.
It's just the Battle Royale mode then, right? Yeah. Like, it's weird. Yeah. There's a cost value sort of.
But I think No Man's Sky was an illuminating case with this because that, it literally is an indie game and then it got the attention of a AAA game and then they priced it a AAA game. Yeah. And then, I mean, there was a whole lot going into the reaction to No Man's Sky, but a common thing I specifically saw was like, how is this $60? This is like, in fact, even before it came out and anyone had any chance to be disappointed with the actual content, just when it was announced to be $60, people were like, what?
I thought this was going to be
procedural. Yeah.
They haven't made it.
And the excitement level of that game was insanely high. It was the sort of perceived value of that game was enormous, but because it sort of had indiness about it, some people were outraged that it was going to be $60.
Yeah.
It's as if price isn't real. It's just psychology in that.
Yeah. In it.
I have released one game at $0, one game at $5, one game at $10, and one game at $15. So my next game either has to be $20 or -5. And I don't want to call it too soon, but I'm hoping Tactical Breaches won't be worth -$5.
And that's a little insight into the financial wizardry of Francis.
The next question comes from Andy, who writes, Dear C&C Dream Team, as you all continue to contemplate the real and significant issues that divide our two great countries, might I add my 2 cents? As a left-handed American, I always use my fork in my left hand, knife in right, understanding that my right-handed friends and family forked with the right hand, but not realizing that until now, thanks to your investigative journalism, that they actually did indeed switch hands when presented with both utensils at a meal. I appreciate the ongoing discourse about this issue, and I can hope you can all squeeze another year's worth of internet debate in about it.
Wouldn't be surprised.
Your friend and Patreon supporter, Andy, aka Butterbeans in Discord, from Chattanooga, Tennessee. P.S. In the event of a disastrous Brexit, know that you can seek refuge here in Chattanooga, which is only a 45-minute drive from the Jack Daniel's distillery, which I've been to the Jack Daniel's distillery.
Yeah. In Chattanooga?
It's in Lynchburg, but I imagine that's 45 minutes from Chattanooga. Okay. I didn't get drunk there because it's in a dry county. You can't sell booze.
That's ironic.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
That is genuinely and completely ironic.
Yeah, it is. It's like, I think Alanis Morissette's one of the lines in that song, the definition of the word irony. Yeah, no, I've been there. We did an improv tour in Nashville once, and we went to go to the place where you can see where the whiskey comes from, but not touch. Actually, you can a bit.
Did you want to touch?
Well, touch with my mouth.
Oh, drink.
You wanted to touch the whiskey
with my mouth.
They have these just big pools, and everyone just puts their hands in. I know you.
Let
want
me just
to
touch the last of this whiskey with my mouth.
Just the idea of a whiskey tour ending up with everybody just putting their hands in a great big lake of it.
I was sort of hoping that it would end with
and it'll be bottled up.
Me getting ushered into like a glass elevator by the ghost of Jack Daniels and bequeathed.
You get no whiskey. You get nothing.
Exactly.
You touched it with your mouth.
Yeah. Well,
Grunka, dunkety donga.
Yeah. No, you think you're Charlie in that scenario, but we're all Augustus Gloop and we know it. PPS, I do say fork and knife. So this is, is it the exception that challenges David's rule? Who knows? Does anyone still care? I like both, David and actually in their emails indicated that they were Patreon backers, which presumably we've never really done stretch goals, but maybe this is a stretch goal. Like if you back us on Patreon, we will probably continue to talk about cutlery, and I don't know how we got onto this. I don't know how we'll ever get off it.
I can't believe it's true. Like, I think I said it because I'd heard it from American friends, but it was just like in a kind of like, surely this can't be right, but I guess it is.
I mean, I think it's like, maybe this feels like a question we've never actually been asked, which is like, what is something that you believe that is just, well, we wouldn't have known until this had happened. Something that is genuinely slightly unbelievable, yet so inane to be barely worth talking about.
I mean, the brilliant thing is it's actually surfaced a second sort of inane fact, which is the order in which people say fork and knife.
Exactly. It's like a sort of, it's like a kind of banal revelation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like a kind of...
Honestly, especially in these days and times, banal revelations are kind of what I need.
Better than the other kind.
Yeah, I don't really need an earth-shattering twist on my understanding of the world right now. I just a sort of like, a sort of soft sense of novelty. There's still...
I think I'll cling to this as NASA discovers the asteroid that's going to end all life on Earth. And I'll think, at least I found out more about forks and knives than I ever thought.
Yeah.
Well, do you want another one?
Yeah.
Stop me if I
Christ, here we go.
Can we take it?
Get ready.
So the meaning of quite seems to be different in America. Like in America, quite means very, and here it usually means somewhat. But the more I think about it,
not very.
I discover this difference.
What do any of these words mean? Because they're all very context dependent, right?
Yeah, and I discovered this difference ages ago, and
if you're nasty,
and it was pretty shocking to me. But as I thought about it since, like every time the word quite comes up now, I think about this. And actually, in British English, it's random. It's like 40% of the time we use it to mean very, and the other 60% we use it to mean not very. Like,
yeah, it is a very contextual. But
no, it's quite contextual.
I've definitely had emails that have read quite shockingly, kind of
very
insultingly.
Shockingly.
How shockingly? Just for clarity.
Oh, good. I don't even notice it. It's so good. That have read very insultingly.
I wonder
their use of quite.
If there's a sentence we can say, This is like the lying god's riddle, where this might be a sentence where you say where like, it's quite strange to switch hands with your knife and fork. And this could be like true in British English and in American English, but with inverted meanings for both things.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it would have to be, it'd have to be, it's quite normal to switch hands with your knife and fork during a meal. That would be the kind of pure...
Perfect. That's the perfect storm.
Yeah.
Well...
Mary writes, Dear Crepe and Cake Bar, I'm old enough to remember the time when, to play more of a game you loved, you had to buy game number 2. Now we're encouraged to supplement each game purchase with other paid enhancements for the best experience. This can get tiresome and expensive. Question, which of these is the most evil? Loot boxes, microtransactions, season passes, and are any of them really necessary? I'm excluding paid DLC since you did used to be able to buy boxed expansions. Supplemental question, what is the delivery mechanism of your choice for cake of the sponge variety? Slice, muffin, cupcake, cake bar, or cake pop? Love listening to your voices. Keep up the good work, Mary. So to the first one, it's loot boxes, obviously, but do we want to talk about them?
Yeah, I guess the gambling element of that combined with the paying real money element of that is pretty damning.
Yeah, you can kind of feel that you're making personal decisions about all of the others.
Yeah, the thing is, like, to be honest, I don't think, not to disagree wholesale, but like, I think microtransactions is a category of thing, right? It's just small amounts of money for a stuff.
Yeah, and so, I don't consider them evil in principle.
No, I think there's a case to be made for the fact that we've had to get used to things that did used to be free or easy to make yourself for a game becoming things that you're expected to purchase. But
yeah, there are some clear-cut cases of that where, like, the thing about, like, I can't remember what game it was, but there was a game where, like, cheats were being charged for, and that's obviously a thing that used to be completely free. Cosmetic items is like, it's a thing where, like, maybe in the olden days, if they were in the game, they would be free, but then also they frequently weren't in the game, and now they are much more common in games because you can charge for them. And those just seem very harmless to me. Like, it's, particularly because that revenue the developer gets from that makes that game more viable. And so any game that can incorporate that in a way that's not annoying to players and doesn't ruin the experience is probably a positive, because it's meaning those developers can actually make that game and make it more viable in the long run.
It's kind of really good in many ways that you have such a game like Fortnite, which is so all kind of conquering, but has, you know, as far as I understand, a very fair and, you know, generally liked monetization system.
That it got wholesale from Dota.
Yeah. Well, yeah, totally. Yeah. And which is, you know, with the model, which is kind of people seem to spend like a fair amount of money in it. You know, I think, as in, like, I've had quite a few conversations with mostly parents of sort of young teenage kids who have been playing Fortnite, and they sort of say, yeah, we've probably spent about 50 quid in it, which seems a good amount of money for the amount of enjoyment they seem to get out of the game. And like, yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, I think the battle pass system, which is not quite the same as a season pass, because a season pass could very much be the sort of Battlefield extra 40 quid please for maps over the next 6 months kind of thing. Battle pass system, I think, is a pretty good way of making sense of a free-to-play game, making value out of a free-to-play game, because it's got the comfort level of it's pretty much a one-off purchase, but it is still nonetheless a purchase that players will feel they kind of need to get in on in order to see and do everything, which is... And
it's a sort of balance between a need, you know, to be involved with the game and all that stuff, but also to feel good about doing it, because, you know, it buys a relationship with the game and like...
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's both effective marketing, but also I think a good negotiation of the challenge that all free-to-play games face, which is getting that money out of people without doing a big old evil all over the floor.
As to the second part.
Yes. As to the second part, cake delivery. Any thoughts on this?
What is, like, I think we need to clarify the functional difference between muffin and cupcake here.
I don't
feels
consider
existential to me, but
I don't consider a muffin to be a delivery mechanism for cake. I consider muffin to be its own entity that has cake-like qualities, but
I should. My wife actually makes cakes for a living, and I should probably know. I should be able to.
Would you like to write into the podcast?
I'll have to do this. I'll have to do this.
Yeah, right. I mean, it could. A muffin feels like a dire cupcake, not in a qualitative sense, in a Dungeons and Dragons sense. You know what I mean?
It's big, fruity.
It's bigger. It's bigger. It's more robust.
Like a direwolf, it's fruity.
Yeah. It's like it's of a different threat level. One of them is fauna. One of them is beast. You know?
I don't like cake pops.
I do. My only experience with cake pops is at
Discourse is on fire.
Kind of steamrolled. It was at a Blizzard event, like at Blizzard HQ in where is it? Anaheim?
Yeah.
And it was I think it was a Diablo 3 preview event. It was the one where they announced the real money auction house and fucking hell.
Did you whoop?
No. It was private, like it was, behind closed doors sessions, and then I was one of the people reporting on it, and I fucking said all the things to them, like, hey, doesn't this totally undermine the whole concept of randomized loot? And they gave their justifications, and then yeah. But they had really good cake pops with some kind of Diablo symbol on it. I can't remember if it was a pentagram or something like that, but they were like custom Diablo cake pops. And I was surprised at, like, they were both somehow dense and yet not dry. And yeah, delicious.
Excellent.
No complaints about them. If I was tasked with reporting on the cake pops, it would have been a much more positive article.
Given that muffin was in this list, I would go with muffin, personally.
Muffin is my favourite of the list.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
But muffin has no icing, and all the others have icing.
I don't like icing. It's too sweet.
I'm not big on icing either. It's too sweet, yeah.
But that's why you have the cake to balance it out.
But with muffin, you get the nice stodgy, genuinely, that is, I love a bit of stodge.
Same.
And you get a nice bit of fruit.
Yeah, or chocolate.
Or it might not be, yeah.
Or, whatever else is in the muffin. Bit of nuts.
How fruity is your muffin?
I do like a blueberry muffin.
Me too. Oh, I do like a blueberry muffin.
Maybe the muffins I've had have not had enough fruit in them, because they've been pretty just fucking sponge. Kind of dry after a fashion.
Dry?
Oh, I mean, the sponge is not itself dry, but there's just a lot of it with nothing to counterbalance. And I feel like the icing counterbalances the sponge in other cake products.
I don't think you've experienced
I don't know, I feel like...
I mean, the cake pop is actually the highest icing to sponge ratio, and that's might be why I like it.
No, see, for me, like a cupcake just makes me want another cupcake. Whereas, like, when I was a kid, my mum used to come back from Costco with these, like, fucking, like, catering-sized mega muffins. And, like, one of them, that's a treat that lasts an afternoon.
How big is a catering-sized mega muffin?
I don't know, I was a child at the time.
So it seemed larger.
I just, think of a muffin and then, I don't know, double it. Like, it was, like a greater dire cupcake. Like CR10 or something, I don't know. You just see question marks when you try and figure out what level it is. Otherwise, slice for me. Hate to be normal.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I love to be normal.
Orthodox cake choice, lads.
If you guys don't like icing, you must hate the filling of a cake, like the middle bit.
I don't mind that. I mean, I'm not totally anti-icing. It's not,
I don't know. I heard some pretty strong anti-icing rhetoric earlier.
It's just not the purpose of the exercise for me.
For me, it is the purpose.
But it's just that I see icing being made, and I know it's...
Icy icing, yes.
So you got buttercream. Do you like buttercream?
That's the filling, right?
Well, yeah. Or sometimes it's on the outside as well.
I mean, the words are so good, it's hard to argue with it.
It's sugar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And butter.
Yep.
And
I'm in.
Like, do you want to just have like a big, it's just loads of butter?
Yes. I do.
You don't need to continue that sentence, Tom. I know it is a sentence.
And this is actually, if anything, the shortcoming of cakes, I often feel, is if you look at the pile of ingredients, you kind of think, could I have that instead? Like a big pile of sugar and butter. That's the most indulgent, glorious thing I could have. I would need only half that amount. I could eat just half the sugar and butter by itself, have none of the flour, That would satisfy me a lot more than the final finished cake.
Okay, just having a big bowl of buttercream.
Yeah.
Well, we've really learned something today.
Didn't expect this one to be so controversial.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't. It was just that Alex
For
and
us to have very different opinions.
Yes, right, yeah. We're normally on the same page about things, but apparently icing, that's where it ends, the concordance.
And for Americans, we mean frosting.
Yeah.
Right. Final question comes from Marsh, of all people.
Yay.
Marsh
Imagine, if you will.
has scuttled out of his cave.
Indeed. I was going to do it in the Marsh voice.
Please do.
I'm not, because actually I feel like there's more mileage in Marsh's actual writing, and if I were to squeak over it, then I would be doing him two injustices at the same time, which is below the par. Dears, Marsh writes, I love a good palette swap. I even get a hit of endorphins when I drag the hue slider around on my own shitty art. Probably because of the association with reaching a new zone in a NES game. Swap a blue for a yellow and suddenly a cold steel wall has become a sun-bleached slab of stone, and the world entirely thrillingly new. What are the simplest, cheapest tricks that game devs can pull for the maximum effect? Sordid asp death wav. Marsh.
It would be good if every letter ended with a kind of...
Yeah. Please sign off with your favourite
Ascension sound effect.
No, we should ask people to sign up with your favourite death noise from the game.
I do like the sound when you destroy/recruit Samael, where it's the sort of like a very, very compressed
Yes.
which is either someone laughing or someone choking. Impossible to tell. It is a stodgy muffin. What was the question? Game dev tips and tricks. One weird trick. Tom
Come on,
Francis
what's your
hates
one weird trick?
Well, obviously I don't engage in this kind of cheapness myself. Leave that to John. But I watched a good GDC talk by the Path of Exile folks, recently, and they were talking about just how they release an expansion every 13 weeks, pretty much without fail, and have done for ages, and have plans to do so for 10 more years, if you can believe that. And they just, like, they've got good at it, basically. And they say one of the things that surprises them with other developers is, like, they think you should never do a day-night cycle in your game if you're going to do this kind of ongoing content, because A, I mean, it doesn't really add that much. And then B, if you don't, you can take those same assets, change the lighting, change the color grading, and then make that the setting for your new expansion. They basically showed some side-by-side shots of, like, it wasn't as simple as that. It was like, here's, I don't know, some nice grassland with some rocks and stuff, and here's our hell zone, and they basically showed the same geometry just put through these different filters and different lighting things, and it generally does look like a totally different area. And yeah, you can, I think, like, the thing Marsh is saying is true, which is, like, it is, we can talk about it as cheap in a sense, but it really does work. Like, the colors have a strong emotional effect, and the sense of, like, new content, I guess it's by itself, it would be empty, right? But if you combine it with new mechanics, then that's all you need, basically. And, like, you want it to both function differently and to feel different. And neither part of that requires you to make a whole new load of really intricate 3D assets. Like, that isn't actually the thing that triggers the content signal in your brain, which is, I mean, that's what these guys have to think about day in, day out, is like, how do we make this feel like content? We're going to have to release some stuff that it's got to scratch that itch, and there's a bar for that. And if you drop below it, you're just rehashing what you already have. They also had an example where, like, they showed, like a flying kind of bat type enemy and some kind of humanoid enemy. And then they showed, like, a kind of, like, not a candelabra. What's it called? Where, like, a sort of metal stick comes up from the ground and there's candles on top of it.
A brazier.
Yeah, perhaps.
A torch.
It's just like a candlestick that's very tall. Something like that.
Candelabra.
Yeah, maybe it is.
Was that something?
Ultimate candle.
And they basically just took that model and just plugged it into the rig for this flying enemy and for this humanoid enemy. And like, I don't know if you've ever taken a model and put it into the wrong rig, but it goes insane. But if it's like a weird metal thing, you end up with this kind of cool, like skeletal metal creature that has all the same animations as the flying enemy, but it's made of a candelabra. And that was basically their enemy set for one of their expansions. It's just like, we just kind of took these metal things and just plugged them into our humanoid and to our organic frames, and they all just look like this cool, weird metal enemies. That's what they did. And obviously they had new mechanics and stuff, so the players were happy because they were actually having to overcome a new challenge and there was new gameplay. But yeah, the burden for creating new assets is actually lower than you might think.
Alex is shaking his head.
I've been racking my...
Yeah, me too.
Because I'm thinking of... I'm in my column for RPS, which is up on Blocks at the moment, what I work on in this book, but I'm sure I've written loads of little things like this, and I've completely blanked on.
Didn't Mortal Kombat do this? I heard someone say recently that like there's a bunch of I think like Sub-Zero and Scorpion and then I think they 8 more of those people
because it's just like the same tabard. It's just a differently coloured tabard.
I think I'm trying to think about the things that I find very effective when they change that make me feel like I'm in a whole new place, but actually I think a lot of them are probably fairly labour intensive. Like just changing the font or the colouring of a UI is often enough to make me go like, oh wow, you've changed everything.
Yeah.
Like if my active abilities used to be green and now they're orange, like I know it's just colour again, but it's like, oh wow, you must have changed everything about how my character works, and this ability feels better now, I think, and well, it's more responsive, and yeah, you have improved the frame rate, and no, it's just orange now. I think when you talk about that new content trigger, I think that's almost the key thing. It's like whatever it takes to, well, actually apparently it doesn't take very much to trigger that sort of like, everything's new feeling.
Yeah.
Well, there's also withholding, like mentioned, Animal Crossing earlier on, but the way that it just withholds stuff from you, and then when you finally get it, it's really not very much different to but the fact you've waited a week for it to appear, then you can, oh, this is the best.
Yeah,
thing
like
ever.
a value waiting thing.
Yeah, I think that any game that can kind of signal a future kind of reward in that way, and then kind of really make you wait for it, I think that's a really...
How do they signal it to you?
It's just like every week there's a certain market. Every day the shop stuff changes. This is for buying kind of furniture and sets and that sort of thing for your house. And then every week there's some sort of trader that comes. So, that's 2 little ticking systems that you're kind of waiting on. Treat them mean, basically. The players. Treat them mean.
And that's all of the questions and insight we have time for. If you'd like to send us an email for a future episode of the podcast, you can do so by emailing us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can also tweet us at crateandcrowbar. You can find our YouTube channel at youtube.com/crateandcrowbar. And thank you, as ever, to our Patreon backers, whose support is very much appreciated. More about that, patreon.com/crateandcrowbar. We have a lovely Discord community, mentioned several times already this episode. Just gonna... My voice is squeaking in a weird way. Find a link to Discord in the show notes or on our website at crateandcrowbar.com. If you would like to follow us around on the internet as individuals, you can, I've said that as individuals like 150 times, and I just realized it's redundant. I'm on Twitter at CThurston, that's CTHURSTEN. Tom, as a Gestalt entity, is
at Pentadact, PENTADACT.
I'm going to buck the trend a little bit. I'm going to point towards my website, which I also don't update.
Okay.
That's just our rotational.
So was the purpose of doing this so you didn't have to spell the thing you can never spell?
No, that wasn't the intention, but I wish it could have been part of it. It's rotational.co.uk. ROTATIONO. Oh, fuck, God, so close.
It's rotational, everyone knows how to spell it.
Just rotation and then al.
Rotating al.
Rotating al.
But it's not that.
No.
Don't write that.
Don't do that.
It's a great way to learn how to spell it, except that it doesn't let you spell it right.
You need to register that. Well, because someone else is going to do it for you very soon. It might be me.
I'm doing it right now.
Thanks for listening, everybody.